Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
You're watching Lebaran Awani, and we're joining you from Rumah Putih here in KL. I want to wish you Selamat Hari Raya. Thank you so much for spending Malam Raya with us. Delighted to introduce you to our guest tonight, Senator Wan Ahmad Fayhsal, Wan Ahmad Kamal, Deputy Minister of National Unity, who is also spending his Malam Raya with us. Thank you for your time, Senator.
Yeah.
And if we may call you Fayhsal
Yes,
in the
please.
interview, thank you for that. Now, I'm very happy that you're spending Raya with us when I know you have a little one at home and you would probably want to be spending time with your family as well and your loved ones. Can I ask you how Raya has changed for you since you've become a father? And how perhaps the memories of your Raya as a child, you would want to kind of pass on some traditions in your young family as well.
First and foremost, Eid Mubarak to you, Melisa and Sharaad. Well, this is my first Raya when I'm having a newborn, who's growing fast as a toddler now. So it's our first time together wearing baju Raya.
Sedondon ke
Sedondon,
semua?
yeah. Similar color, similar taste. And I'm looking forward to bring him and my wife to see our extended families. Well, they are just in Selangor and KL. And it reminds me a lot about the tradition that I think all Malays, Muslim in this country normally do during Eid, which is it is something quite special when it comes to visiting our relatives. Yeah, but nowadays things have changed so much because KL has become kampung itself. Most of our parents, they are no longer staying outside of KL.
Right.
So when we go back to, we're not going back outside KL, we just go back to our families or parents' house in KL or Selangor. So I think that pretty much changed the culture of celebrating Eid in Malaysia, because the growing, well, I must say, urbanization of Raya culture. Nowadays, I think with the advent of technology, the way we celebrate Eid has become much more simpler in terms of connectivity. We don't have to travel a lot compared to before to visit our family members who might be stranded in certain areas. And by just doing video call, that would suffice sometimes. Although, ideally, we would love to go and see them. Yeah, but sometimes during this COVID, we are still in the COVID era, the old folks are still vulnerable. Yeah, so I think better be safe rather than risking our old folks to be affected with COVID by, if we don't observe the SOP.
Fayhsal, I can ask you, I mean, you have been in your lifetime as a politician, kind of a lightning rod for a lot of difficult Malaysian conversations, but maybe people don't know enough about you as a person. Maybe you can tell us a little more about yourself.
Yeah.
You know, the milieu in which you grew up.
Oh, I'm very much someone who being raised in a very modern but conservative Malay family. Yeah, I went to normal national schools, but I spent a good 5 years in boarding school, where I mostly learn and study with Malay students. And I've been raised and taught in a local university. So I'm very much Malaysian at heart in that sense. But at the same time, I'm also cosmopolitan when it comes to my exposure in reading, in cultural matters, because I grew up in KL, where you meet a lot of people from diverse backgrounds. My neighbors are non-Malays as well. So I do understand the sensitivities of being a Malaysian, living in a multiracial, multicultural society. But being a politician myself, I am very much a committed Malay nationalist. Maybe that attracts the lightning rod that you said just now on certain issues that might deem sensitive to the public here.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. I mean, since you brought it up, you know, one of the things that struck me when you said that was the fact that you hold the position as Deputy Minister of National Unity.
Yeah.
And many people pointed out that you are Deputy Minister of National Unity for all Malaysians, not just Malays.
Yeah.
Tell us why you think that the comment about Malays needing a protector, why that seemed to get such backlash from people. It seems to me, maybe just in my echo chamber, that there seemed to be more backlash than there was support for it. Why do you think that was?
Well, I think because the conversation, mostly the respondents are in English, all right? But if you were to talk in the Malay lingo among the Malay crowd, I think the reaction will be different. Yeah, so I believe it's a necessary conversation if we want to move forward to address the sensitive issues with regard to the hurdles of national unity. I've read this matter in a lengthy interview by The Age, published by The Age, about 3 pages long. And I said, if we want to resolve the national unity issue, one must address the Malay dilemma. Why?
Are you regurgitating Mahathir there?
I do believe in what Mahathir has diagnosed about the Malay situation in this country. Maybe not totally I agree with him, but at many levels, I do believe there are lingering issues that we must address in order to move forward as a bangsa Malaysia. So one of the major issues is about, for example, affirmative action, the role of Malay culture, language in binding others, and how the Malays, as the majority of the population, must play a custodian role to our national interests. I mean, I disagree with the way we project, for example, the idea of Ketuanan Melayu as Malay supremacy. I personally disagree with the way we translate it into English. What I understand, I believe from what I've read in the history of this country, in Malay tradition and religion, as what I said, is about custodianship.
So Ketuanan Melayu translates to Malay custodianship?
Yes. Malay dominance. I want to ask you this though, and coming back to the fact that you have a young child, the kind of Malaysia that you want your child to grow up. We see the country now, falling behind its regional partners. Dr. Mahathir recently made a comment on this as well. And countries he never expected to overtake us. So we always thought ourselves, well, we're going to be poor cousin to Singapore. That was fine. We were resigned to that. But now we are falling behind Vietnam, Indonesia, and so forth. Right? There are deep structural and institutional problems in this country under having had 60 years of Malay dominance and custodianship, as you put it. Is there a problem with that? Is there a problem when after 60 years you haven't been able to deliver performance in terms of governance? Why keep the same formula?
Well, first and foremost, like every nation and countries, we have tradition, we have history. And in my view, as a politician, as a young politician, my political philosophy, I very much encourage or am a proponent of internal reform rather than a revolution from outside. So if we want to make a change to this country as a politician, one must respect and understand first what are the ground rules that form and shape our social contract, our social institutions. And that's why I pretty much address the Malay questions. Like in the US, for example, we were shocked. I mean, the Americans were shocked to have a first black president. And what was the backlash? Trump. Trump was a reactionary response from the white populace on having a first black man as a president.
So is Perikatan Nasional a backlash to Pakatan Harapan? Is that the analogy?
Okay, if I may put it in a very mild way, Perikatan Nasional is a party, a coalition that addressed the loopholes, the gap that Pakatan Harapan failed to address during the 32 months reign. That's what I said earlier about this Malay protector sentiment. That's the perception at large. That's why during few elections, state elections especially, we could see the trend of the Malay voters slowly moving away from Pakatan to Perikatan. They don't want UMNO and Barisan Nasional, but they prefer to have a more safer alternative, which is Perikatan Nasional in that sense, because we exude Malay confidence and Malay security, because having PAS, Bersatu, and Gerakan, it's multiracial anyway. And in Sabah, we have STAR, we have our SAPP, a Bumi Putra-centric party dominance in Perikatan Nasional. Yeah.
So do you think that the pendulum might swing again? Because your example of people's resistance to change or perhaps dissatisfaction with the lack of change might mean pendulums swing, right? So as many of us are expecting general elections perhaps sooner rather than later, is that something that you're expecting? Perhaps the pendulum might swing?
Yes, I believe the pendulum might swing back to the old ways if we fail to provide a better alternative to the conservative class. I think the one who really can make or break the future of this country is the conservative class. I mean the majority, the Malay majority.
Is that the majority you reckon is Malay conservative? Is
Yes.
that the majority you see Malaysia?
Yes, they are not in Twitter. They rarely discuss things in open because we all know Malays, the traditional Malay society, when it comes to sensitive issues, they rather discuss in private. But the youngsters, of course, are different. I'm talking about the largest segment of the Malay society. So if you go down to the rural areas, to Felda, to villages, in the mosque, in the surau, you understand the vibes and the ebb and flow of Malay thinking and about politics, about culture. All Malays want a cleaner government. They also hate corruptions, but not at the expense of sacrificing the fundamentals of Malay and Islam in the government. So the perception for the past 22 months during PH era is that the Malays feel insecure because of rapid reform being made by some of the ministers, which Tun Mahathir also complained. Tun Mahathir reached out to PAS, to other Malay leaders and held Congress Melayu because of that sentiment.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but let's come back and continue this discussion on Lebaran Awani. Please stay tuned. We will be right back with more. Hello, welcome back to Lebaran Awani. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
And we are here at Rumah Putih in KL chatting to our guest tonight, Senator Wan Ahmad Fayhsal, Wan Ahmad Kamal, Deputy Minister of National Unity, here telling us about how he's spending his raya, now that he's also a father of with a young family. I just want to come back to something that we talked about a little bit earlier. Sharaad mentioned that he called you a lightning rod for some of the difficult conversations. I thought that was quite interesting. And because Raya is a time for self-reflection, it's a time for forgiving, a time for also celebration, but to make amends. And I'm just wondering why or how that might grate on you, the comments or the haters or the detractors. Is that something that you've come to terms with, made peace with? And how do you deal with that and growing as a person?
Yeah. Well, as a Muslim, of course, we are enjoined to forgive our enemies as long as they do not cross the most fundamental line when it comes to truth and falsehood. So I think that's what the Prophet does during Eid, and that's what we celebrate as a Malay and Muslim in this country. During Raya, we forgive those who have erred against us, and we also seek forgiveness from those who we have done wrong to them.
Why do you think you attract so much controversy? Every interview I see you give, you make headlines afterwards. Why do you think there is so much feedback to everything that you say?
Maybe because I speak something that is taboo sometimes in mainstream media or in certain segments, especially in English medium media. So, but I do believe it's a necessary conversation because without addressing it, we will never resolve the problem in the first place. We pretend things have become more progressive, things have settled down, we can make do without affirmative action and other things. But in truth, those things are still matter to many Malays out there, even to the non-Malays, those who need such intervention. And I believe critical conversations are lacking in our society. Yeah,
you've parted ways with your former comrade-in-arms, Said Sadiq, and in very interesting ways.
Yeah.
Because in many ways, he's trying to stake out a future
Yeah.
that is non-racial, that is progressive, that is Malaysian.
Yeah.
And you go back to kind of a mid-20th century paradigm of, a kind of consociational democracy with ethnic groups and parties representing their interests. Do you think that in many ways your thinking is sustained by this continued emphasis on racial divisions? You talk about enemies. Who are your enemies, Fayhsal?
Well, the enemies that I'm thinking of in politics are those who try to unravel what has become permanent in our social institutions and our national identity. Those who went against the social contract, those who misunderstood or misrepresent the history and the identity of Malaysia and the Malays as a civilization. I think that's what I'm viewing as an enemy to in my understanding of politics.
But can't there be alternative competing narratives, different but true in their own way?
Oh yeah, of course. I think, as I said, when I say the enemies, doesn't mean we have to go out and kill them, right? I think the remedy to this sort of issue is conversation and dialogue, because ignorance breeds hatred. I think that's what happened in this country among the Malay extremists, among the chauvinist Chinese or Indians who misunderstood how things were before, how this country was built, or what was built then before the imperialist British, Dutch, Portuguese came to this country. I think this is what happened when we have an education that is not comprehensive enough to remind each other the importance of being united despite differences. The most important and lowest hanging fruit that we could champion, I would champion as a national Deputy Minister of National Unity, is the upliftment of Malay language as a national language in all segments of society. Economy, education, culture. I think this can be done, easily can be done. But are we doing our best? I don't think so. Much has to be done at various levels, ministry, corporate level, private sector, society. So if I could deliver my own legacy in this, would be on Malay language.
Well, that seems to be echoed with what the Prime Minister is talking about, having, championing Bahasa Malaysia in all sorts, the primacy of Bahasa Malaysia. We see that in the foreign students being now required to take that, even though it's an existing policy. But at an international level, there's been a lot of backlash about using Bahasa Malaysia at an international level. Indonesia has shot that down as an ASEAN language. I mean, is that just what we want to be? Do we just want to use BM as jago kampung? Do we just want to be good at BM in Malaysia, use that as under unity, but yet not progress in any way on an international level?
I think this is the misnomer or misunderstanding that we would have, where to develop, to progress, we have to embrace English, for example. I think that's...
You don't think so? You
No,
think it's a misnomer?
It's not a dilemma. We need both, and even other languages to progress. But what I'm saying is this: why must we look down on something that has proven to unite at least the region? Our forefathers wrote diplomatic letters to European royalties in Jawi for God's sake, and they could understand, they could read that, and it's something that we are proud of. So if the Prime Minister believed that one of the ways for Malaysia to progress by promoting Malay language at the regional level as one of our soft power tool, we must support it, because I believe it will bring much benefits when Indonesia itself is rising as one of the top 5 giants in world economy by 2050. So we should promote Malay language.
Well, cultural nationalism has been with us since the National Cultural Congress in the early 70s, right? There has been no lack of investment in Bahasa Malaysia. I mean, nobody can accuse any government, I mean, mostly Barisan Nasional for the last 60 years, right, of neglecting Malay. And so the question really is that what Malaysia needs to address some of the real problems? Low wages, falling back behind in the economic race. Electric vehicles. Vietnam was still fighting its last war with China when we mooted the idea, and yet they have far exceeded us. There is something fundamentally wrong with our economy, with the leadership of the country. And yet the focus is on the low-hanging fruit of cultural nationalism. And I wonder about this bizarre retreat to the 20th century and perhaps back to the 16th century, instead of a look towards the future.
Yeah. Well, I politely disagree with that view. I think it's not mutually exclusive for us to focus on one hand the cultural matter and on the other on economic and other more pragmatic issues, right? Because you cannot separate both of them in nation building. As I said, we are not like any other countries where we have monoculture or mono race that governs. So in Japan, they don't have issue about language. Yeah, because they're all Japanese, they speak Japanese language. But for us, it's different. We are not, we are multiracial. Yeah, where the issue of Malaysian identity is not being resolved properly yet with our dasar kebudayaan kebangsaan. This debate has been ongoing, you're right, since 70s. But because the government, previous government, lacked political will to really make a firm stand on this issue, that's why we are dilly-dallying on this
22
matter.
years of Mahathir's administration, do you think he let the guard down?
When it comes to cultural and language issue, you should ask Dr. Sri Anwar Ibrahim. He has a different view when he was the deputy to the Prime Minister then. For example, there is this issue of putting Malay language as a regional language for ASEAN. Dr. Sri Anwar told me when I met him during the iftar, if the cabinet then agree with him to ensure and empower the language, the pronunciation in Baku, we don't have any issue with regard to Bahasa Malaysia as a Bahasa ASEAN or Bahasa Melayu as a Bahasa, because we share the same diction, intonation, pronunciation with Indonesia. But because then the cabinet under Tun Dr. Mahathir flip-flop using Bahasa Malaysia and then Bahasa Melayu back to Bahasa Malaysia, things have been unraveled. This is what I said. We have not resolved the cultural issue, the fundamental issue about social institution, Malay language as the national language.
Okay. Well, we're not going to resolve it tonight, but at least we've had a nice conversation spending Malam Raya with us.
Yeah.
My very last question to you is, every Pagi Raya I will go and Raya with my mother, my family, minta maaf, minta ampun. It's a time for forgiveness. Who would you like to Raya with this year that you haven't yet asked for forgiveness?
Well, I would love to go, inshallah I'll be going to see my father, whom I have not seen for past 30 years. Yeah, he's now in the States. So hopefully I could visit him for the first time and having my first Raya with him ever. And that would be a very special moment for me as a son.
Do politicians Raya with each other, kosong-kosong? Is that something that politicians do and then start the counter all over again?
I think yes, we will have that moment and session during the open house. But when it comes to battlefield, well, we start squaring again on national interest matters. So I think, yeah, we do that, of course.
Pick up the boxing gloves again. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the
Thank
show
you.
today. And that was our conversation with our guest today, Ahmad Fayhsal, Senator Ahmad Fayhsal, Ahmad Kamal, Deputy Minister of National Unity. And thank you so much to the sponsors of our venue today at Rumah Putih in KL. And Sharaad and I would just like to take this opportunity to wish you Selamat Hari Raya, Maaf Zahir Batin. We are signing off for tonight. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan. That's all we have for tonight.
Thank you so much for watching. Selamat Hari Raya.
Good night.